Welcome to the 180 Life Coach Podcast, home of the Becoming Movement, a place for awareness, truth, healing, rebuilding, and becoming. A journey of understanding who you were, who you are, and if you're ready, becoming who you were always meant to be. Because it isn't over. You're still becoming. And now, here's your host, Ingra Michelle Williams.
What if the person you become isn't actually the person that you were meant to be? Not because you're broken and not because you failed in life, but because life happened. People hurt you. Heck, disappointments happened. Loss happened. You learned how to survive. And somewhere along the way, you started making decisions. Not decisions that you would have made, but decisions based on fear, pain, rejection, guilt, or maybe even disappointment. But what if the way you saw yourself today, it isn't the whole story? What if you've accepted things about yourself that were never originally meant to define you? And what if the life you're living right now is being shaped by things that you've never acknowledged or even thought to question? Today, I want to ask a question, and that question is, what if? My name is Ingra Michelle Williams, the founder of 180 Life Coach and the Becoming Movement. And what I want to tell you is what I am, and what I want to tell you is what I am not. And first of all, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a medical doctor, and I don't play one on TV. What I like to refer myself to being is what I have coined the term a humanologist. A person who has studied my own life while quietly, sometimes loudly, observing the life of others. When I started 180 Life Coach, it was my desire to try to express a need that I had inside of me for a long time, that was to help other people. Not only was it my desire to help others, but to also to gain a better understanding of myself. And what I found fascinating was through this process, through the diligence that has been an undertaking of over 25 years, the things that I have found has totally changed my life and transformed my life in ways that I could never even imagine. I know that I'm now better to understand myself, and I've been able to understand how I view other people. I've been, for the first time in my life, able to say that I truly love myself. I've always thought that I've loved myself. But I can say boldly and I can say proudly that I now fully understand what that means. I have learned through this process how to honor myself and how to honor my body. So the information I have learned has not only transformed me on the inside, but it's also transformed me on the outside. I've also learned what happiness truly means. And many people, including myself, say, I just want to be happy. But what we want, and what I believe what we really want, is peace. Peace that passes all understanding. Peace within our lives, peace within our choices, peace within the things that we choose to do. So again, I want to ask you some questions as we start today, and I want you to stay with me. And if you're busy driving, cut up the volume. If you're doing something that's going to take your mental energy away, then I want you to pause me, stop me, and come back later, because I believe if you truly stop and listen to these words and let them resonate, that you will be changed. And not only will you be changed, but you'll have a new understanding, and you'll be able to look at your eyes look through your eyes and look at others with a new lens of understanding. So again, I want to ask you some questions. What if the way you see yourself isn't really who you are? What if you've been carrying beliefs about yourself that were never true? What if you've been spending years of your life trying to live up to the world and other people's expectations? What if the voice that you hear every day silently talking inside your head isn't even your own voice? And what if things that you've allowed yourself to believe about yourself came from painful experiences rather than truth? What if? And what if you've been surviving through life for so long that you've forgotten who you really are? See, most people never stop to question the story they believe about themselves. They get up every day and they go through their life and they believe this is what it is. This is who I am. This is how I feel. This is what I do. This is how I say. This is the way I react. But never questioning where those feelings, ideas, thoughts, ideologies, where were they birthed? Where did they get life and start living? And it's hard because when you've done something for so long, anybody will tell you it becomes repetition. And the repetition that we continue year after year, it truly starts to shape and form who we are and what we believe ourselves to be. I was one of those people. I always self-isolated. I kept a small group of friends, even if friends at all. There were periods and points in time that, I just was like, I just don't deal with too many people. And I never stopped to think, why? Because I would look out and I would see some people who would have tons of friends, constant people around them. And you start to go, they shouldn't have all those people around them. But why am I feeling that way? What about my story has allowed me to live in a certain way and someone else to live in a totally different way? It's not that either way is right or wrong, but something formed our ideology about what we believe to be acceptable, but we never stop to question where it comes from. A lot of things that shape us come from our childhood experiences. It shapes how we see our self-worth, how we deal with relationships, how we view money, success, failure. Think about that for a minute, because it's easy to tackle small stuff. And I want you to gain what I'm trying to see, right? Because pain can become our identity if it's left unexamined, if we never stop to realize why. So if we think about success, you will have or you will hear people say, in my family, that's just what we do. I come from a long lineage of entrepreneurs. So my cousin's cousin, as far as I can think back, we own our own businesses. We all drive Mercedes. And I'm saying this, but these are real things that I've heard. I had one young lady when I was selling cars. She came in and she had this young lady with her and she was looking at Mercedes. She was like, we want to see the Mercedes. And we sold all different types of cars. But the young lady, she didn't want that. She wanted to look at a BMW. She's like, I really like BMWs. But it was almost like this pressure that she needed to pick a Mercedes. And I just remember sitting there thinking like, well, why she can't pick out what kind of car she wants? And the young lady was saying, that's what we do. We only drive Mercedes. And she said it with a sense of confidence and a slight bit of arrogance that nothing else would be acceptable. And so you will have probably many people in that family who will only drive Mercedes, never questioning where did this crap start from? Like, who started it? Because it came from somewhere. And if we never stop to question why, without even thinking, we'll continue to do the same thing. Now, I'm talking about a car, but we can take that and we can engage it in any conversation. We can take it deeper. We don't stop to even question what we do every day because it becomes a part of our DNA. And again, if left unchecked, it can either continue to keep us on a trajectory that does not allow us to express who we fully are. During the time that we'll spend together, I will give you stories. I consider myself somewhat a storyteller. I never thought I was, but the best person I can give you a story about is me. So I will share with you some of my past, and I will share with you some stories of people who will remain nameless, because I think it'll help you start to see and understand how it's time to examine things we do. My granddaughter comes to visit me sometimes, and I love when she's over. She's such a friendly little girl. And she loves coming over here because she lives in an apartment community. And, when you have so many people in a small condensed area, it's hard to really determine, who your neighbors are. And so my daughter, she loves to allow her to come over because it gives her a little bit more sense of peace that she's with us. And she will ride her bike, and she has made friends with several of the kids down the street. And she'll always run over, and the first thing when she gets to my house, she'll say, Grandma, can I go up the street? And I'm like, okay, sure, fine. And she'll get her baby doll to jump on the bike, and they'll be down the street, and I'll be peeking out at them, and they'll be just playing and having a good time. And one day I went to go check on her, and I walked outside, and there was 5 or 6 kids in my front yard. And when I saw them, immediately something inside of me got really uncomfortable. And I was like, what in the hell are all these kids doing in my front yard? Now, I didn't have a problem when they were up the street. And I love children. I just don't like them on my property. And I used to say, true tea, it's because they don't know how to act. I used to say, because I had given kids popsicles about 10 years ago, and they ate the popsicles and dropped the popsicle sticks. And so I used to say, I don't like kids at my house because they just don't have respect. They'll throw trash in your yard. You can't control them. So no. And now this was when my kids were kids, but now here I am with my granddaughter. And the moment I saw these kids, something inside of me went on high alert, self-defense, anger, frustration, get away from me. And the feeling was so strong that I stopped and said, why do I feel like this? I was like, oh my God, I got to figure it out. Why do I feel like this? Because I have been on my own path of becoming, and I have learned to pause, because the first step of becoming is aware. And you have to be honest with yourself. You have to look and examine yourself. And so here I am going, why do these kids bother me? And guys, I had to search my brain, because it was a memory that was inside of me that was so buried down that when it came out, it was like I remembered it in perfect context, but it surprised me. And it was because my first experience in kindergarten, the first day of school, I was so excited about going to school. And my dad would always tell us, your best friends are your sister and your brother. You don't need anybody else. You can't trust people. That was the first lesson that I learned about my interactions with other people, is that my brother and sister were my best friends, and that my family was my family, and they were the people that I could trust. Other people were not to be trusted. But I was so excited about going to school. And the first day of school in kindergarten, when the teacher tried to call my name, she messed it up. I was so excited talking. I did not realize that she was even trying to call me, and she kept trying to pronounce my name. And when I finally realized, oh, she's calling me, I said, no, my name is Ingra. And then this little boy, little Caucasian boy, he started going, Inga Binga, Unga Bunga, Inga Binga from the jump. And everybody started laughing, including the teacher. All day, he teased me. Inga Binga, Unga Bunga, Inga Binga from the jungle. And I was so sad. I was so hurt. I wanted to go home. I didn't understand why I was not being protected, why I was being made fun of. And that day, I determined that children were not safe. It stayed in me because if you know me, home is my safe place. Home is my sacred place. Home is where I go when I want to shield myself from everything else. And to see these kids in my sacred place that represented painful memories, I was immediately put on a defense. Do you see how we can harbor things that we don't even realize? And here I was thinking I just didn't like kids at my house, but I realized in that moment, the reason I felt a way about kids at my home, because it wasn't up the street. If they were up the street, they were fine. If I was out in the public and I saw a cute little girl with an ice cream, I could be, hey, baby, how you doing? Here you go. But now that you're in my yard, no. That's where I draw the line. Why is that the line? And I had to question, and only because I questioned myself was I able to then say, wow, we got to fix this. And so I would go out of my way to, when my body wanted to tense, speak to the children with love, interact with them with love, be okay if they were rolling in my grass. And it's not always easy, but what I will tell you is that that feeling started to dissipate, that they're not bad. They're not the same kids that did that to me 50 years ago. This is how we have to understand, like I said earlier, pain can become an identity if we don't examine where is that coming from. But we have to be able to be aware because you cannot change what you refuse to see. It comes with asking the questions. And I've been a person that has asked the questions over and over and over again. And sometimes by me even asking a question, I find that it puts people in a sense of defensiveness. Sometimes the simplest question, why are you questioning me? And why do you think that defensiveness comes? Because somewhere I'm convinced that person who gets overly defensive when you ask them a question is because they've had to answer questions their whole life. That something happened to them that questions became unsafe. What I will tell you, you cannot change what you refuse to see. And sometimes I've talked to people and I'm trying to get them to think about why they reacted the way they reacted in a given situation and almost feel the push. Because people will say, Ingrid, don't try to psychoanalyze me. Don't over question me. Because the people that are closest in my orbit who really, really know me, they know I'm a thinker. They know I'm a humanologist. Even though they're in my closest orbit, they're afraid because they feel like I'm trying to expose something. Never wanting to even pause that she's just trying to gain a deeper understanding because there's something that they're protecting. And so survival strategies, I will tell you, when we try to put up walls, it's a survival strategy. When we try to deflect, pain, it's a survival strategy. When we try to keep ourselves in a box with walls and a door that keeps us tight and we don't allow people in, it's a survival strategy. And those things that once protected us, in many instances, they're really holding you back. Because again, we never stop to ask the question, what if? What if the way I'm doing this is because of something that I am not seeing? And what I will tell you, when you start to become aware and you start to ask the question, we understand that our goal is not to blame ourselves or to blame other people, but to understand. Because when you are a part of this movement, right, there are pillars that I've developed, and that's why you have to get the manual, and it's free and it's on the website, is because when you walk through these pillars, you will gain so much understanding. And when you understand truly, it releases a power and a freedom over your own life that you may not even know that you did not have. I lived my life, guys. I lived my whole life trying to understand, why am I this way? I believed and I pointed it to one person, and that was my mother, because everything I felt that was not aligned and right in my life, I felt that it was her obligation, responsibility alone. But through this process, I learned that it wasn't hers alone. It was so many different elements, so many different incidents, so many things that happened that I didn't even remember, that I didn't put a name on, that I didn't understand, that I never even questioned. Because heck, how can I question something I don't even remember? And it happens every day. It happens every day. Because before you can understand who you were meant to be, you have to understand who you are today. And part of understanding who you are today, you got to know who you were. And so I say the becoming a movement is not about becoming some new version of you that's better than the older versions of you. No, the becoming movement is about understanding who you were, understanding who you are, and if you're ready, understanding who you were always meant to be. What do you mean? Let me share you a story. A story about a tree. I love trees. I love nature. I love flowers. But as I've been doing these recordings, as I've been doing this work, memories, they flood me. And maybe this is why I've always looked at pine trees. Well, I've always looked out at a pine tree and I can just look at them in their majestic holiness. I'm like, oh my God, you're just so beautiful. You're so powerful. You're so tall, right? Because pine trees have a lot of potential in them. It wasn't until I was doing this work that I remember when I was a kid, me and my brother and sister, we used to always have these stupid, this is yours, that's yours kind of contests where we were always competing about who was going to have the best. Cars would drive up the street. That's your car. Nope. And the next one is your car. And we would laugh like, oh, you got the raggedy car, and we would take turns of whose car it was. And so my dad brought home these 3 pine trees. And of course, my brother, when he saw them, he was like, that's my tree. And then my sister was like, this one is my tree. And then, of course, the last one that was left, I was like, okay, that one's my tree. And so it was funny because when he put them in the ground, it was in exact that order that we had picked out the trees. So the first one being my brother, who was the oldest, the second being my sister, who was in the middle, and then, of course, the third one being mine. It was the last. The funny thing was my tree always was a little bit shorter than their trees. And I never thought about this, honestly, until I started doing this work. One day, my dad had somebody come over to the house. I guess they were going to help him with some work, and he didn't want to have to carry whatever they were trying to get out the house because we had a very vertical layout in our backyard. So it was very long. And my dad was directing this guy who was with him to say, basically, just pull up through the yard, just pull the truck in the yard. And he's trying to guide him. If you can imagine, he's waving him. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Come on, to the right, to the right, to the right. So he's trying to guide him. And I was mad. I was watching and I'm thinking like, oh my God, he's going to hit my tree. because he didn't go between my brother and my sister's tree. He went through my tree and my sister's tree, if you can imagine that. So he's pulling it and he's trying to wave him and correct him as he's pulling through so he doesn't run over the trees. It was probably one of the most traumatic scenes because as he was guiding him through, he hit my tree. The tree bent and it popped back up. I started crying. I was like, oh my God, he hit my tree. Daddy, you let him hit my tree. He hit my tree. And I'm just crying. Oh my God. Oh my God, I was so upset. Even thinking about it still gets me upset. Whew. This is how stuff hides in us, how it hides in our bodies. Because when I saw my tree get hit, I was angry with my dad that he had allowed this to happen. The tree was standing there, but it hurt me that he ran over my tree because it belonged to me. As fate would have it, after my parents got divorced and we moved from the house, the trees were trying to grow, but for some reason, the other two trees, they really kind of took root and they took off. And my tree, it didn't do so well. The more it grew, because we had moved one block over so I could go and I would still go over to the house sometimes because my mom had rented out the house. But the tree, it had a bend in it. And the other trees had really taken off, but my tree, it just didn't look so well. Now, the day that the tree got hit, it popped back up because it was a sapling. And anybody who knows anything about trees, when you put the tree in the ground, because it is very flexible and it can bend, sway, move, and it has so much potential for growth that most people stake the trees to make sure as they grow straight. Our trees were not staked. My dad simply put them in the ground, and it was a very young sapling. And so when the truck ran over it, it didn't break it. But what we didn't see was the damage that had been done. Even though it didn't cause visible break, the tree never fully recovered from the trauma of being ran over that day. It never grew at the same pace. It was half the height, and it was crooked. I often think today, as the memory came back to me, is it still there? I can only imagine that it would have had to be cut down because pine trees can be pretty massive, and that slight curve would only be more damaging over time. A risk of the tree falling over and hurting structures or people, but very expensive to try to cut down after many years of growth in the wrong direction. And I realized even telling that story, it really kind of solemnly brought me down because I do wonder about what happened to the tree. The tree was very important to me. But see, I see that tree as us as people. Sometimes the pain, the damage, the things that we experience, they start to slowly erode who we are as people. And it's not even noticeable. Nobody stops to really ask children how they are. When parents are going through traumatic events such as moving, they never stop to ask their kids how they're being affected, that they have to attend new schools, make new friends. When children deal with divorce, we assume our children are okay because we're still just trying to survive the divorce, that we don't stop to think that it's affecting more than just us, but it's affecting everything around us. Pain left unexamined. And some people, they don't want to grow because growth only occurs when we become curious instead of defensive. And most people, out of nature, we want to defend ourselves and we don't want to ask why. We don't want to say, what if? What if I don't like orange shirts because something happened to me by someone who was wearing orange? Because memories can be painful, but also can be the cost of staying the same. Because transformation starts when we start to question. And before you become who you were meant to be, you have to understand who you are today. We try to cover up, we try to mask, we try to pretend, but pretending never really solves problems. Have you ever asked yourself, or ever said, this is just how I am? This is just how I am. Have you ever stayed in a relationship longer than you should have, and you know, I shouldn't have stayed in that relationship, but you did? Have you ever just looked in the mirror and wondered, where have I gone? Have you ever just felt stuck in your own life, but you couldn't explain why? Have you ever reacted to something and then later asked yourself, like me with the kids outside, why did I feel like that? Or does your life feel like you're living on autopilot? You get up every day, you do the same things, the same way, eat the same foods, have the same routines, and just ask yourself, but why? Well, we're going to answer those questions. And if you're ready, we're going to continue to keep moving and to keep growing and to keep becoming. So before I go, I want you to just ask yourself, when you're just in your free time, what beliefs about you have you accepted as truth without ever questioning where they come from? What things? What things do you do? What things do you say? What habits do you have that you just do and you never question it? And this week, as you go through your week, every time you find yourself thinking, that's just how I am, stop and ask yourself one simple question. What if it's not true? So I want to thank you so much for joining me today. And I want to make sure that you follow for the next episode, Why Some People Never Change. I think it'll continue to build on everything we've learned today. And I want you to make sure that you follow me on all my social media accounts, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and as well here on all streaming platforms. And when you have time, make sure that you go to my website, 180 Life Coach. That's 180 Life Coach. And I want you to download your free Becoming Manual. I think it'll really help as we start to walk through this, as we start to uncover who you're becoming. Until then.
Thank you for joining us on the 180 Life Coach podcast. Remember, awareness is where it begins. What you do with that awareness is your choice. And becoming is your decision. Because it isn't over. It's just the beginning.